A stormy night unravels a deadly secret, and every clue pulls our detective deeper into danger. Settle in as the mystery unfolds. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the arrest that nearly broke the agency. The night had already done its worst when the telephone decided to take a swing at me. I was at Wolfe's desk at 11:52 p.m., trying to finish a report I should have finished 3 hours earlier, when the bell went off with the kind of cheap-shot timing that makes a man consider taking vows of silence in a monastery. The rain outside was drumming on the brownstone windows like a pack of impatient creditors, and the office lamp cast long yellow bars across Wolfe's empty chair, making it feel as if his bulk was still parked there, looming in disapproval. I grabbed the receiver because ignoring it wasn't an option. Something about the ring had a panicked edge. "Nero Wolfe's residence," I said, crisp and official. I didn't add Archie Goodwin speaking because the caller wasn't giving me the luxury. A woman's voice came in hot, breathless, and pitched high enough to crack glass. Please, I need help. You must listen. My brother's been arrested. They've taken him. They say he killed someone, but he couldn't have. He couldn't." That kind of hysteria is usually my cue to hang up gently and get back to my evening. But she kept going, fast as ticker tape gone berserk. "They'll ruin him. They're out for blood. You must get Mr. Wolfe immediately. This is Lorna Vale. Please, he must take the case tonight." The name Vale struck a bell. Wall Street money, the kind that made the rest of Manhattan smell faintly of cigars and arrogance. I leaned back in Wolfe's chair, stretching my legs. "Miss Vale, it's nearly midnight. Mr. Wolfe is unavailable, also unconscious." "I don't care," she cried. "My brother, Evan, he's innocent. They say he murdered Barton Kellish in that horrible penthouse, but Evan wasn't even—" "Oh, please, Mr. Goodwin, aren't you Archie Goodwin? You must be Archie. I was told you would answer." That annoyed me more than the hour. "Miss Vale, if you want Wolfe to take a case, panic is the worst sales pitch. Try calm, collected, and in daylight." "I can't wait. If he won't see me tonight, I'll be at his door at dawn, and I'll stay there until—" That got my attention. Wolfe hates uninvited dawn visitors worse than war, famine, and Republican fundraising dinners. "All right," I said. "Slow down. Who told you Evan killed Kellish?" "The police, They arrested him in the hallway outside the penthouse. They said they caught him red-handed, but that's impossible. Evan wouldn't hurt a fly. Well, not fatally. And Kellish was alive when Evan left him." "I swear it!" Her voice cracked. Rain hammered harder against the window as if rooting for her despair. "Where are you calling from?" I asked. "My apartment. I can't go near the station. They'd swarm me." "Oh, please. Can't Mr. Wolfe—" I cut in. "Hold the line. I'll check." I didn't promise more. Making promises at midnight is a foolish habit and leads to unnecessary running around in wet streets. I covered the receiver with my hand and headed upstairs. Wolfe's suite was dim, except for a crack of light under the door. He wasn't asleep after all. Considering the excited soprano leaking from the receiver downstairs, that was a mixed blessing. I knocked once. "Sorry to disturb your beauty sleep," I called, but a woman's shriek is echoing through the wires. "Thought you might prefer to hear it in person." "Confound it," Wolfe growled from inside. "Enter." He was in his yellow silk robe, sitting in the big armchair as if it had grown around him. A book lay open on his lap. His face was set in the same expression he wears when discovering someone has mislabeled an orchid, disgusted but curious. "What is this?" he said. "Lorna Vale," I said. "Claims her brother Evan has been arrested for killing Barton Kellish. Says it's all a frame. Wants you to drop everything and save them before sunrise." Wolfe pressed his lips together. "Give me the telephone." That, right there, was the first sign the evening had gotten serious. Wolfe doesn't take calls after dinner unless the house is burning or someone is offering an obscene amount of money. We went back down to the office. I handed him the receiver. The moment Lorna heard his voice, her panic went through the roof. I could hear her even from 2 feet away. Wolfe cut in with the kind of iron patience that could shut down Congress. "Madam, compose yourself. If you wish my assistance, you will speak clearly and concisely. Begin again." To her credit, she tried. She repeated the essentials. Evan Vale, arrested for Kellish's murder, no motive except fabricated ones, Wall Street whispers of insider scandals, and the police are out for blood. Wolfe listened in silence. When she tripped over her story, he stopped her cold. You say your brother phoned you after the time the police state he was arrested? Yes, he called. He said Kellish was alive, but frightened. He sounded... That, Wolfe said, is impossible. Even from my chair I felt the temperature drop. Wolfe doesn't toss around impossible unless he's pegged a vital inconsistency. He ended the call politely but firmly. You will remain available. Mr. Goodwin may require your presence. Then he hung up and massaged the bridge of his nose. Well, I said. She is lying, Wolfe said, or terrified, or both. Mr. Goodwin, get dressed. Now? In this weather? My socks are still drying from yesterday. He gave me a glare that could melt steel. A man has been killed. Another has been arrested. The police will aerosolize the scene by dawn. You will go to the penthouse. At once. I sighed. Any chance I get hazard pay for midnight stockbrokers? No. He stood and reached for the bell cord. Fritz, he called as the kitchen door opened a moment later. Mr. Goodwin requires sustenance. Fritz entered with a faint bow, holding a tray with coffee and a small sandwich that had probably been destined for Wolfe's own midnight snack. I took it gratefully. Wolfe continued, You will go to the Kellish penthouse. You will observe. You will not play the cavalier. I never cavalier past midnight, I said. He ignored that. You will telephone me at intervals. If Inspector Kramer is present, you will be civil. That depends on whether he's civil. Wolfe actually allowed himself a small grunt, his version of a chuckle. Archie, Kramer is a professional man. He may be irascible, but he is not malicious. That's what I always say. He just hates my tie choices. Wolfe scowled at my tie as if reconsidering that statement. Return promptly. I cannot abide extended uncertainty. That was Wolfe speak for, don't get yourself shot. He doesn't say it aloud, but after years together, I know the tune even when the lyrics are missing. I finished the sandwich and set down the cup. Outside, thunder crackled, shaking the window panes. Perfect weather for walking into a murder scene. I grabbed my hat, coat, and notebook. Wolfe watched from behind the desk, his bulk anchored like a mountain that had no intention of budging for anyone's corpse. Archie, he said as I reached the door. Yeah? Do not permit your curiosity to outpace your judgment. That happens only on holidays. Pfui. I stepped into the hall and headed for the front door. The rain slapped the stoop like it had unresolved issues. Behind me, I heard Wolfe pulling the bell cord again, no doubt summoning Fritz to bring his beer in a chilled glass now that it was past midnight. In a few minutes I was out on West 35th Street, coat collar up, hat brim low, the city's wet neon reflecting on the pavement like smeared jewels. Somewhere uptown, a penthouse held the remains of Barton Kellish, and a collection of clues that had decided tonight was a good night to start a brawl. I raised a hand for a cab, wondering whether Lorna Vale's panic was genuine, manufactured, or just one more wrinkle in a messy financial war. Either way, Wolfe had sent me into it, and when Wolfe sends you, you go. The cab splashed up to the curb. As I climbed in, I felt that familiar, uneasy tug, the one that says the night is about to get worse before it gets better. 47th and Lexington, I told the driver. And with that, the hunt began. The cab let me out on 47th with the sort of skid that suggested the driver was late for his own murder trial. The building loomed above me, tall enough to make a man reconsider his life choices, especially the ones involving midnight trips to fresh corpses. A uniformed officer stood under the awning trying to look alert, though the rain had given his cap the appearance of a wilted mushroom. When I showed my credentials, he directed me to the elevators with a look that said he'd seen enough homicide traffic for one night. The elevator was one of those sleek, modern cages that thinks it's too good for the rest of the building. It whisked me to the penthouse floor in silence, which did nothing for my nerves. When the doors slid open, I stepped onto a hallway carpet that had probably cost more than Wolfe's annual beer budget. Halfway down the hall stood Pearlie Stebbins, blocking the double doors like a bulldog guarding a bone that wasn't his. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. Goodwin, he grunted. Beat it. Pearlie, I said. Always a delight seeing a man so committed to his craft. May I? No. He folded his arms the size of modest tree trunks. You're not coming in, and don't try any fancy footwork. I don't dance in the rain, I told him. Wolfe sent me. He'd like photo stats of the scene layout and object placement. Perfectly legal, if a little avant-garde for your taste. Pearlie's jaw clicked like something had short-circuited. You and that fat orchid hugger. Careful, I said lightly. He's sensitive about his dimensions. He exhaled through his nose. Fine. No touching anything. No pocketing anything. No talking to anybody unless they're alive and willing. That's a strict policy, I said, but I'll try. He stepped aside with reluctance bordering on spiritual pain, and I moved past him into Barton Kellish's last known address. The place looked like the set designer for a gangster picture had been told to spare no expense. Sleek black piano, glass bar cart gleaming with imported bottles, chrome fixtures, and a Persian rug that had unfortunately become the latest exhibit in Kellish's financial portfolio, deep red, irregularly patterned, and smelling faintly metallic. A large terrace stretched beyond glass doors, offering a rainy Manhattan night view that would have been breathtaking if the body hadn't already provided enough breath-related drama. 2 technicians were working the room, dusting for prints and bagging items with quiet efficiency. Near the far wall, a woman stood like a marble statue someone had forgotten to dust. Tall, impeccably dressed, dark hair pinned in a twist, sharp enough to puncture ego. Her name tag, paper, hastily clipped, read Mara Lyle. I approached. "Good evening," I said. Or bad, depending on your optimism. She turned slightly. Her eyes were cool, steady, and the exact color of expensive steel. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's assistant." Her gaze dipped once, measuring me, then returned to the city lights. "You people move quickly." "Only when coerced by hysterical socialites. You worked for Mr. Kellish?" "For 5 years." Her voice held no tremor, no grief, just the practiced neutrality of a woman used to seeing fortunes rise and fall with the morning bell. He was brilliant, ruthless, and tonight, apparently, mortal. I let my eyes sweep the room. The motif was unmistakable. Wall Street worship disguised as interior decor. Ticker tape framed in thin silver strips, leather-bound financial ledgers on display like art pieces, stacks of broker chits arranged neatly on a side table. What wasn't visible were personal touches. No photographs, no books unrelated to finance, no keepsakes. The penthouse looked less like a home and more like an office with a bar and an oversized rug for aesthetic cover-ups. "You ever see him entertain here?" I asked. "Rarely." Her tone hinted that if he had, the guests would have found the place about as romantic as a quarterly earnings statement. He lived for the market. I crouched near the sofa. Something glinted faintly between the edge of the rug and the baseboard. With Pearlie watching like a hawk with blood pressure issues, I used a handkerchief to nudge it out. A single cufflink. Silver, engraved with a stylized H. Evan Vale's initials were a V and an E, last I checked. I held it up. "Friend of Kellish's?" Mara considered it. "Not that I recall. He wasn't the jewelry loaning type." Pearlie lumbered over. "That yours?" he asked. "If you see me wearing cufflinks that fancy," I said, "arrest me for impersonating a gentleman." He snorted and handed it to a technician for bagging. A few feet away lay a highball glass shattered into 3 major pieces and countless tiny regrets. The technician gingerly held one shard under the light. "Prints don't match Kellish," he muttered, "or the Vale guy the uniforms picked up." "That's so," I said casually. It was a nice red herring, fingerprints that belonged to someone entirely irrelevant, or more likely someone trying to be too clever for their own good. I drifted toward the fireplace. The grate was still warm. Inside, half consumed, lay a corner of paper charred into a curling black tongue. I crouched, using the poker to flip it gently. It was a sheet from a trading memo. What remained of it referenced a hostile takeover. Whoever Kellish had been planning to ambush financially, they'd gone to considerable trouble to silence him first. I filed that in my mental drawer labeled "Things Wolfe will pretend not to care about until he does." Pearlie cleared his throat. "Kramer's on his way," he said, "and he's in no mood." "He usually saves that for me," I said. "I'm flattered he's expanding socially." Pearlie ignored me, which was understandable. A moment later, the door opened and Inspector Kramer entered with the kind of step you get when you've missed dinner and found out the DA has opinions about your competence. His coat was soaked, his cigar stump somehow still lit, and his eyebrows looked ready to leap off his face and start interrogating suspects on their own. He saw me and scowled, but it was tired, not explosive. "Goodwin." "Inspector." "You're here for Wolfe." "Always. Someone has to represent the intellectual side of the partnership." He grunted. Fine. Stay. But no interference, no grandstanding, and no pestering the boys. I never pester boys, I said. Only men with cigars. He shot me a glare that suggested future subpoenas, then moved toward the body outline on the rug. This thing already stinks, he muttered. A trader with a murder on his hands, a rival dead, and too many people with motives you couldn't fit in a ledger. I ventured, "You're not buying Evan Vale as the killer." "I'm buying evidence, Hanand," he said. "But the evidence so far has lousy credit." It wasn't approval, but it was close enough to count. I continued sweeping the room, noting what was absent more than present. No wallet, no phone, no personal files. The omission felt deliberate, like someone had taken a vacuum to Kellish's private life. Mara watched silently, arms folded, the impeccable model of a grieving professional, or a woman who knew more than she wanted to say. "Ms. Lyle," I said, "anyone Kellish particularly hated this month, besides competitors, rivals, associates, clients?" "That narrows it slightly," she said coolly. "But no, he had many enemies, but none I'd accuse of murder." "Not even Evan Vale?" She paused a fraction too long. Evan despised him, but despising Barton Kellish was practically a company hobby. Before I could prod further, Kramer finished with his technicians. "Goodwin," he said, "if you're done wasting midnight oil, clear out. I've got to preserve what's left of this zoo." "Always a pleasure," I said. "Give my regards to the DA." He waved me off with a grunt that, translated, meant, "Tell Wolfe I hate this, but I'll tolerate him. That's respect in Kramer speak." I took the elevator back down, stepped into the thinning rain, and hailed another cab. The sky was turning from black to a watery grey. Manhattan's way of telling me dawn was preparing an ambush. By the time I reached the brownstone, my eyelids felt like sandbags tied to stubborn ropes. Inside, the office lights were on. Wolfe sat upright behind his desk, robe traded for a brown silk dressing gown, expression unreadable. He didn't look like he'd slept. For Wolfe, that was as dramatic as fainting. "You are late," he said. "A man's got to travel," I replied, hanging up my coat. Penthouse looked like a banker's paradise until someone redecorated the rug. He watched me with an eye that could slice marble. "Are you injured?" "Only emotionally." He harumphed, tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared moments later at the doorway with a tray and a sympathetic expression. "Coffee for Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe directed. "Strong." Fritz set the cup before me with a small bow. Wolfe folded his hands. "Report." I drank half the cup in one go. 3 clues, I said. A stray cufflink, fingerprints on a highball glass that don't belong to the victim or Evan Vale, and a half-burned memo about a hostile takeover. Wolfe grunted. The financial world again. A cesspool wrapped in ledgers. That's poetic coming from a man who hates bankers more than reporters. He closed his eyes briefly. "We proceed. But first, Mr. Goodwin, you will rest. Your judgment deteriorates when sleep-deprived." That was Wolfe speak for, "I was worried." I didn't argue. As I headed upstairs, he added, "At 11 you will resume. There is much to do." "Sure," I said. "Wake me if the orchids riot." He didn't dignify that with a response which was confirmation enough that he cared. And so ended the second act of my sleepless night, on a note of caffeine, sarcasm, and Wolfe's quiet, unmistakable protectiveness. By the time the doorbell rang the next morning, I had almost convinced myself the night's circus had been nothing but an insomnia-soaked hallucination. But the clock on Wolfe's desk read 11:06 a.m., which meant orchid hours were nearly over, and anything that arrives during the 10:55-11:05 window is usually fate's idea of slapstick. I was typing up notes from the penthouse visit when the bell echoed again, sharp, insistent, and with the rhythm of someone used to immediate service. Fritz's footsteps approached the office door, and a moment later his discreet knock came. "Mr. Goodwin," Fritz said quietly. "A lady to see Mr. Wolfe, Miss Lorna Vale." That name brought back the soprano hysteria from the midnight call. "Show her in," I said, and then reconsidered. "Actually, wait. Did Mr. Wolfe request no disturbances?" "He instructed that you decide." Fritz gave the faintest shrug, which, from him, might as well have been a full-blown soliloquy. "Fine. Send her in." Fritz stepped aside, and Lorna Vale entered like someone trying to glide but tripping over invisible turmoil. She was the kind of blonde who had been told all her life that distress looked charming on her, and she had clearly taken the advice to heart. Her coat was fox fur, draped over her shoulders with theatrical carelessness. Her gloves were pearl grey, trembling slightly at the fingertips. She had a look that suggested equal parts desperation and entitlement, an amusing blend when you're on the observing end. "Miss Vale," I said, "we meet in better lighting." She didn't laugh. "Mr. Goodwin, please, where is Mr. Wolfe? You must sit," I told her, guiding her to the red chair. "Wolfe is with orchids. Orchid hours end at 11. He'll be here shortly if the gods of botany permit." The elevator whirred at that precise moment, punctual as Wolfe's appetite, and a moment later he appeared, massive and serene, adjusting the cuffs of his brown suit. He eyed Lorna with controlled distaste, not at her, but at the interruption of his horticultural routine. "Madam," he said, "you have come." "Yes," she exclaimed, leaping up. "Mr. Wolfe, thank you. Thank you for seeing me. I hardly slept. They have Evan locked away like a criminal. My poor brother, he must be terrified." "Sit," Wolfe commanded, and she folded like a concertina. He settled behind his desk, fingertips touching. "You telephoned in distress last night. I would prefer composure this morning." She swallowed, nodded, and inhaled with enough force to inflate a parade balloon. "I'll try. Please ask whatever you must." Wolfe shifted his eyes to me. "Mr. Goodwin, the notebook." I retrieved it and positioned myself to one side of the room, ready for dictation or interjection, whichever the situation required. Lorna watched Wolfe with the nervous awe of someone checking whether the oracle will approve their sacrifice. "Miss Vale," Wolfe began, "your brother's arrest is unfortunate. More unfortunate is your disordered account. You will now tell it again, without embroidery. Begin with Evan's business with Mr. Barton Kellish." She nodded quickly. "Evan and Kellish work in the same sphere: trading, investments, the financial markets. They were rivals, I suppose. Evan believed Kellish was manipulating something, insider information perhaps. Evan wouldn't say more. He didn't want me involved." Wolfe's brows contracted incrementally. "And yet, he involved you by using your residence as an alibi." She stiffened. "He didn't use me. He was with me until just before the time they claim." "Just before," Wolfe repeated softly, a hazy unit of measurement. I couldn't help myself. "Time can be difficult before coffee," I offered. Wolfe shot me a look. "Archie, restrain your impertinence." Lorna pressed on. "He was with me, truly, but he left only for a moment. I didn't see him go. I had turned away, but it was only minutes. Minutes? He couldn't have—" I raised a brow. "You didn't actually see him leave? You just assumed?" She froze, a small, telling freeze. Well, no, but that assumption," Wolfe said, "is dangerous." Lorna's voice tightened. "Mr. Wolfe, Evan is innocent. I swear he is." "I do not require your oaths," Wolfe replied. "I require your candour." He leaned back, studying her. The air thickened. She trembled, but her eyes sharpened just a fraction, enough for me to note that panic wasn't her only trick. "Fine," she whispered. "There's more." "Of course there is," I murmured. Wolfe didn't reprimand me that time. Sign enough, he shared the sentiment. Lorna reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. 2 days ago I received this. An anonymous note, threatening. It said that Evan must drop his investigation or the ledger would close on him. I didn't show him. I didn't want him frightened. Wolfe extended a hand. She gave him the note. He unfolded it with delicate disdain, as though the paper might try to soil him. The handwriting was blocky, printed, with a faint smudge of graphite. Typical attempt at anonymity. "Archie," Wolfe said, handing it to me, "copy it." I made a photostat and returned the original to her as procedure required. She cradled it like it was a pet on the verge of death. "And Evan?" Wolfe asked. "What did he investigate?" She shook her head. "I told you, I didn't know. He kept secrets to protect me. But I know he was following Kellish's activities. And, oh, this is important. Last week he hired a detective." My pen paused. "A detective?" "Yes, someone named Saul Pantzer." I nearly whistled. Wolfe didn't move, but the temperature in the room shifted in that way it does when Wolfe's brain begins juggling more knives than usual. "And why," Wolfe said smoothly, "did Evan require Mr. Pantzer?" "I don't know," she said helplessly. "I truly don't." Another lie, or genuine ignorance? With Lorna, the line was about as straight as Wall Street ethics. "I see," Wolfe murmured. "Continue." She wet her lips. Kellish had a briefcase, dark brown leather. He kept it with him always. Evan said it contained documents that could ruin reputations, big ones, banking leaders, corporate directors. If Kellish intended a hostile takeover, or to expose one, Evan thought someone might kill him to stop him. That lined up with the burned memo I'd found last night. Wolfe must have made the same connection because his eyes narrowed just slightly. "And last night?" Wolfe asked. She hesitated. "Last night, I told you." Evan left only briefly. "When the police arrived, he called me. He said Kellish was alive but agitated. He sounded frightened. I said, 'Miss Vale, according to the official timeline, your brother was already in custody when that call supposedly happened.' She flinched. They must have the time wrong." "Must they?" Wolfe said. Lorna's composure teetered. "Mr. Wolfe, please, you must help him. I'm telling you everything I know." "No," Wolfe said quietly. "You are not." He let that hang, a heavy ornament on a fragile tree. "But I suspect you are telling everything you believe advantageous." Her breath hitched. Wolfe continued, "Madam, if you deceive me, even by omission, I shall withdraw instantly. I will not have Mr. Goodwin embroiled in perils predicated on falsehood." That was Wolfe's version of a shield raised in my direction. I was tempted to thank him, but it would only spark a lecture on propriety. Lorna sagged. "I'm not deceiving you. I'm confused, frightened." "Understandable," Wolfe said, "but insufficient." I stepped in. "Miss Vale, did anyone else know you received that threatening note?" "No." "Did Evan?" "No. I told you, I didn't show him." "Why not?" I pressed. Her eyes flashed. "Because he was already on edge. He believed someone was sabotaging corporate deals, destroying them, and he thought Kellish was involved." Wolfe tapped a finger twice, his equivalent of a drum roll. "Very well. Here is my proposal. I will accept this case, provisionally. My retainer is substantial. You will pay it now, or Mr. Goodwin will escort you out." Her purse snapped open so fast the clasp nearly decapitated her manicure. She produced a checkbook, scribbled numbers with trembling intensity, and tore the page free. When Wolfe accepted it with a silent nod, she exhaled like she'd been underwater for minutes. "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said, "see Miss Vale out." I offered my arm and she took it, her perfume hitting me harder than her grip. It was subtle at first, something floral, but the more anxious she became, the more concentrated it became, like a chemical reaction in real time. If perfume were clues, she was leaving enough contrails to lead a platoon. At the door, I said, "Miss Vale, one last thing. If your brother has any skeletons, dead or alive, now's the time to share." She whispered, "Evan is a good man." That wasn't an answer, which meant it was probably the truth she liked best. When the door closed, I headed back to the office. Wolfe hadn't moved. "Well?" I asked. He breathed out. "Financial warfare, Mr. Goodwin, the foulest sort. Prepare yourself. This will be tedious." "Great," I said, my favourite flavour. Wolfe reached for the bell cord. "Fritz, coffee." A perfect ritual ending to a morning built on panic and lies, and if my nose was right, an after-image of perfume that might haunt us both before this case was done. The Midtown precinct at 11:30 in the morning has all the charm of a wet ashtray in a wind tunnel. The fluorescents buzzed like irritated hornets, the air smelled of old coffee and older socks, and the desk sergeant gave me the kind of look a man reserves for dentists and tax auditors. I told him I needed Evan Vale for a conversation, and he pointed toward the back with a grunt that translated to, "Good luck, pal. Hope you packed a lunch." I didn't blame him. Arresting a Wall Street wunderkind tends to do strange things to a precinct's atmosphere. Half pride, half dread, all sweat. The door to the interrogation corridor creaked when I pushed it open, because precinct doors always creak. It's in the municipal code. I stepped inside and found Evan sitting at the battered metal table of room 3 like a man trying to hold his life together with frayed shoelaces and a hangover. He wasn't in cuffs, but he looked like he'd been dragged through an editorial comment. His hair was rumpled, his collar half open, and his forehead carried a faint line where someone's patience, maybe a cop's, maybe his own, had snapped. He scowled when he saw me. "You're Goodwin," he said, as if accusing me of something. "That's right. I accept gifts, bribes, and flattery, preferably in that order." He didn't smile. "My sister sent you. She's frantic. I told her not to pull in Nero Wolfe. It complicates things." "You're lucky she ignores good advice," I said, taking the opposite chair. "Wolfe has taken your case, provisionally, which means I'm here to find out whether you're worth the trouble." He leaned forward. "I didn't kill Barton Kellish." "Beautiful start." I opened my notebook. "Let's proceed before Inspector Kramer storms in with subpoenas, warrants, or indigestion." His jaw tightened. "I want to make this clear. Kellish had enemies, not rivals. Enemies. Men who lose fortunes because he enjoyed watching them squirm." "Your kind of crowd," he ignored that. "Someone threatened him. Recently." I made a small show of arching an eyebrow. "And you know this because—" "He told me." Evan's fingers drummed the table. "He said someone was sending warnings, drop the matter or drop dead. Something like that. He brushed it off, but I could tell it shook him." "A nice red herring? Possibly. But with Wall Street types, threats were as common as neckties." "Who sent them?" I asked. "I don't know, but someone else was in that penthouse before me. I swear it." He leaned in further. "The place smelled of expensive cologne. Kellish didn't wear any." "I know. I gave him grief about it once." "Well, what brand?" "Something sharp. Citrusy, European maybe. I'm not a cologne expert, but it wasn't Kellish. And when I knocked, I heard movement. Someone slipping out the terrace, maybe." That was interesting, or misleading. Either worked. "Why were you there?" I asked. He hesitated. Too long. "Business." "Wrong answer," I said. "Try again. The truth version." His eyes darted away. "All right. Verena Locke asked me to check on him." That was a new card on the table. Verena Locke, the broker with better connections than conscience. He flinched. She was worried he'd do something reckless. I swear that's all." I jotted it down. Wolfe would have a field day with that hesitation. "And the phone call to your sister?" I asked. Evan frowned. "I called her after I left the penthouse. I told her Kellish was alive, but scared. He wasn't making sense." "Phone records disagree." His mouth fell open slightly. "They're wrong." I closed my notebook. That's a popular refrain this week. Before Evan could sputter a defense, a shadow appeared behind the glass pane of the door. It slid open, and Inspector Kramer stepped in, not with his usual explosive energy, but with the tired gait of a man who'd spent too long arguing with bureaucrats. He smelled faintly of wet cigar and worse coffee. His hat was pushed back, his coat wrinkled, and his expression suggested I was the itch he couldn't scratch. "Goodwin," he said. "Out. Now." "Hello to you too, Inspector. You look positively jolly." "Spare me." He jerked his head toward the hallway. A word. I stood, leaving Evan to his shoelace repair operation. In the hall, Kramer shut the door and pulled the cigar from his mouth long enough to study me with professional irritation. "You tell Wolfe," he said, tapping the cigar against his palm, "that the DA's office is already drafting the charge sheet. They want this wrapped clean, fast, no detours." "Wolfe doesn't do clean or fast," I said. "He does correct." Kramer's left eyebrow twitched. "Yeah, that's why I'm talking to you instead of hauling you out by your ears." A touching image. He ignored that. "Look, Goodwin, Wolfe meddling now complicates things, but—" He paused, eyes narrowing with reluctant respect. "But he's also the only civilian in this town who might catch something we miss." I gasped theatrically. "Inspector, if you keep complimenting us like that, I'll blush. And you don't want to see me blush." He shoved the cigar back into his teeth. "Don't push it." "I never push," I said. "I merely nudge with enthusiasm." He exhaled a cloud of smoke that hovered like a storm cloud. "Tell Wolfe to tread lightly. I don't have time for his dramatics." "You never do, but he supplies them anyway." Kramer's sigh was a masterclass in municipal suffering. He opened the door, gestured for me to re-enter, then turned and walked down the hall, muttering something about paperwork and ulcers. Back inside, Evan looked jumpier than a squirrel at a dog show. "What did he say?" Evan asked. "That he's fond of you and wants to adopt you," I said. "Now let's continue." Evan didn't appreciate the humour. "Goodwin, please. You have to believe me. I didn't kill him. Belief is for churches, I said. I deal in facts. Right now, you're hiding something. Not murder, something else. His lips pressed together, and for a moment I thought he'd spill everything. Instead, he said, I can't. Not yet. Then don't be offended when Wolfe treats you like a man sitting on a bomb. He lowered his gaze. Just help me, please. I will, but only as far as the facts allow. I left him to stew and made my way back to the brownstone. The streets outside were brisk with early lunch traffic. Men in suits, women in tailored coats, messenger boys weaving like ambitious fish. By the time I pushed through our front door, it was 1:45. That meant lunch in 15 minutes, which meant Wolfe had exactly 14 minutes to interrogate me before Fritz appeared with lamb ragout and made all conversation illegal. Wolfe was already in the office, leaning back in his chair, fingertips steepled, eyes half closed. When I approached, he opened them with the kind of solemn disapproval reserved for opera critics. Well, he said. I gave him the full report. Evan's anger, his evasions, Verena Locke's name, the mysterious cologne, the contradictory phone call. Wolfe listened, unmoving except for a slight tightening of his mouth when I mentioned the cologne. Pfui, he said softly. The fellow is lying, not about the murder, about motive. That's my impression too. He nodded once. Mr. Panzer. What about him? Find him, Wolfe said, immediately. He's probably working another case. Nevertheless, the matter is urgent. Do not, he added, let youthful foolhardiness imperil the enterprise. I object, I said. I'm not youthful, and my foolhardiness is strictly rationed. Wolfe allowed a microscopic smirk. Go. At that exact moment, the elevator whirred. We both turned. The doors slid open with their usual dignified sigh, and there he was, Saul Panzer, flat cap in hand, expression mild as a monk's but carrying the unmistakable air of a man who already knew more about our case than we did. Hello, Archie, Saul said. I grinned. Well, speak of the devil. Wolfe sat forward. Mr. Panzer, your timing is admirable. Saul nodded once. Figured you'd want me. And just like that, the next phase of the war began. Saul Panzer has a way of standing in a room without disturbing a single molecule of air, which is impressive when you consider how often he's the one carrying news explosive enough to redecorate ceilings. The morning he showed up after my precinct visit with Evan Vale was no different. He eased into Wolfe's office with the same calm diffusion as cigarette smoke, removed his flat cap, and nodded once, just once, to signal that he was ready when we were. Wolfe regarded him with the solemnity a bishop reserves for rare relics. Mr. Panzer, he said, report. Saul slid into the red chair, folded his hands, and began with the same unhurried cadence you'd use to describe an uneventful grocery run. Evan hired me last week, he said. He didn't say much, just that Barton Kellish was blackmailing someone close to him, not Evan himself, someone in his circle. He wanted to know who, why, and how soon the knife was coming down. I leaned forward. He hired you directly? Didn't send a messenger pigeon or ask Lorna to flutter her lashes? Direct, Saul confirmed. He was nervous, real nervous, but not about himself, more like he'd stumbled onto something that had teeth. Wolfe's eyelids sank halfway, his version of a dramatic gasp. Proceed. I tailed Kellish for 6 days, Saul said. He was busy. Meetings all over Midtown. Some were routine, clients, brokers, lunch at the Dominion Club. But others, Saul paused, others were not. My pencil tapped the notebook. Define not. Secretive, off schedule. He met with Verena Locke 3 times, once in her office, twice in private rooms at the Towers Exchange Society. I whistled softly. Exclusive crowd. And expensive, Saul added. Those meetings weren't friendly. Verena looked cornered. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. Describe her. Glamorous, sharp, and tired of being scared, Saul said. She's good at hiding panic, but not good enough. She involved in Kellish's blackmail racket? Possibly, Saul said, but there was someone else. Kellish met a third party. Big man, bald foreign accent, Eastern European, thick shoulders. He came and went fast. Didn't want to be seen. I muttered, the international men of murder cliché is becoming fashionable. Saul continued. The big man handed Kellish an envelope. Kellish didn't open it until he got back to the penthouse. Whatever was in it, he didn't like. Wolfe's fingers twitched. Continue. That was yesterday afternoon. Later, Kellish met Verena one more time. Saul reached into his coat and handed me a small paper bag. I retrieved this from a trash receptacle after she left. Inside was a perfume bottle, empty, elegant, and imported. Cologne, Saul said, rare, European, same kind of scent Evan reported smelling in the penthouse. Wolfe grunted. So, Miss Locke purchased a fragrance intended for subterfuge or seduction. Maybe both, Saul said. Kellish sniffed her wrist during the meeting. He didn't look pleased. I said, maybe he was allergic to glamour. Saul ignored me with practiced ease. After that meeting, Kellish went home. I stuck around for another hour. Didn't see anyone else go in, but I can't swear someone didn't use the terrace. Which matched Evan's story a little too neatly. Either Evan was telling the truth, or he'd guessed what a clever liar would guess. Wolfe shifted his bulk, preparing the next phase. We must question Miss Locke, Mr. Goodwin, accompany Mr. Panzer. Just me? I asked, feigning indignation. What if she swoons? What if she confesses? Who catches her? Wolfe breathed in a way that suggested he was restraining a fooey for later use. Take him, he told Saul. He will provide ballast. 5 minutes later, Saul and I were in a cab heading toward Verena Locke's brokerage office, Maddox and Lyle Investments, perched halfway up a skyscraper with enough glass to signal ships. Inside, the lobby buzzed with phones, typewriters, and the constant hum of money being shoved around like sandbags in a flood. We rode the elevator up to the 23rd floor. The doors opened to a corridor lined with frosted glass offices. Verena's was at the end, nameplate polished to a shine. Saul knocked. When the door opened, she stood framed in the doorway like a magazine cover. Sleek black dress, hair pinned high, expression composed but brittle. Her eyes flicked to Saul, then to me. You're not clients, she said, and you're not reporters, which makes you trouble. I prefer the term concerned citizen, I said. Archie Goodwin. My associate and I are investigating the death of your friend Kellish. She stepped aside. He wasn't my friend. Come in. We followed her into a room lined with more glass, more phones, and a panoramic view of Manhattan flexing its wallet. Her desk was immaculate except for a scattering of ledger sheets she tried to smooth with one hand, while the other trembled just slightly. Talk, she said, before someone sees you. Saul took the lead. You met Kellish yesterday. Yes. Her chin lifted. To warn him. Of what? I asked. That he was being reckless. She crossed her arms. He thought he could juggle fortunes without consequences. He was wrong. I smiled. You're polished as a blue-chip stock and twice as slippery. Why don't you give us the dividend sheet? Her eyes flashed. I have no reason to help you. True, I said, but you have every reason to protect yourself. And right now you smell like motive, opportunity, and imported cologne. Her breath hitched. I don't know what you're talking about. Saul said quietly, You bought a bottle yesterday. Same fragrance Evan Vale smelled in the penthouse. Verena froze. For a split second, sheer fear crossed her face. Raw, sharp, unmistakable. Then she composed herself. It was a gift. For Kellish? I asked. No. She hesitated. For myself. Saul and I exchanged glances. Her voice wasn't lying, but something else was. Did Kellish blackmail you? Saul asked. No. Did Evan? She blinked. Evan? No, he was desperate, not dangerous. Interesting distinction, I said. Her hands tightened. You think I killed Barton? I didn't. But he was playing a dangerous game with men much worse than me. Name one, Saul said. A pause. Victor Harron. That name carried weight, financial weight and political grease. I jotted it down. Thanks for the red herring, I told her. It's a lovely shape. Her jaw tightened. Believe what you want. We left her pacing, arms wrapped around herself as though someone had taken a crowbar to her confidence. In the elevator, Saul said, She's terrified. Of us? No, of the truth. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was seated at his desk, tie loosened, eyes half closed as if meditating on human folly. When Saul and I entered, he opened them with a snap. Well, he demanded. No confessions, I said. but some premium-grade fear. Verina's hiding something. Might be her conscience, might be her stock portfolio. Saul gave Wolfe the concise version, the cologne, the meetings, the foreign bruiser with the envelope. Wolfe listened without interrupting, his lips pressing tighter at each detail. When Saul finished, Wolfe exhaled slowly. Miss Locke is withholding vital information. That is incontrovertible. She's scared, I said, but not of us, of who comes after us. Wolfe tapped the blotter twice. Mr. Goodwin, apply pressure via Mr. Cohen. I blinked. The Gazette? Yes, Wolfe said. This is not my preferred method, but it is expedient. That's Wolfe speak for don't make me regret this, I muttered to Saul. Wolfe growled, Archie, do it. Yes, sir. He leaned back, eyes closing in dismissal. Saul tipped his cap and slipped out, noiseless as vapour. As I headed for the phone to call Lon Cohen, Wolfe added, without opening his eyes, Use discretion. And for heaven's sake, Archie, restraint. Me? I said. I'm the picture of restraint. Phooey, he whispered. And with that, the scene closed like a ledger page. Someone wasn't ready to balance. If there's one thing guaranteed to ruin a morning at the brownstone, it's the telephone ringing before Wolfe's orchid hours end. At 10:41 a.m., the bell gave a shrill, jagged cry that suggested someone was dying or wanted to accuse Wolfe of murder. And in this business, those two categories overlap more than etiquette prefers. I answered because Fritz was inspecting lamb shanks in the kitchen and Wolfe was communing with cattleyas. Goodwin, I said. Kramer's voice came through low, clipped and exhausted. Archie, get down to West 57th, now. Must I bring flowers, or is this purely social? Shut up and listen. It's Verina Locke. My stomach pitched. What about her? She's dead. That didn't need further persuading. I grabbed my hat and coat, shouted to Wolfe that business called, and left before he could veto it. The elevator clanked me down to street level, and one cab ride later I was under an awning staring up at Verina's sleek apartment building, the kind where rent cost more than a junior broker's morality. Upstairs, the hallway smelled like wet wool and disinfectant. A pair of uniforms parted to let me through, one giving me the familiar expression cops reserve for recurring nuisances. The apartment door was open and I stepped inside. The living room was modern, angular, the kind of place designed by someone who thought comfort was for the weak. Verina lay on the rug in front of the sofa, hair spilled like ink, face pale. A bottle of pills rested near her right hand, and on the wall behind her, written in thick black smears, were 3 melodramatic words. He ruined me too neat, too theatrical, too wrong. Verina Locke didn't do melodrama. She did control. Kramer stood near the dining table, coat off, sleeves rolled up, jaw set in a line carved from granite fatigue. His cigar smouldered untouched in an ashtray. When he looked at me, there was no anger, only the worn-out resignation of a man pushed by too many deaths too fast. You got here quick, he said. You called before the orchids ended, I said. Miracles happen. Save it. He jerked his chin toward the body. What do you see? I crouched by Verena. A woman who didn't write that message, I said, and one who didn't plan this. Why not? Her cologne. I scanned the room. Where is it? She bought a bottle yesterday. It was practically her signature, but it's gone. Kramer exhaled. We noticed. And her ledgers, I added. She told us she kept them in her office and home. None here. Kramer nodded grimly. We're pulling her office records now. I moved to her typewriter, an immaculate steel-grey machine perched on a glass desk. A sheet of paper was still in the roller. I slid it out carefully. One torn edge, one line typed. Meridian Holdings, Joint Directive. The same corporate beast Kellish had been circling with his hostile takeover memo. The same motive swirling like smoke around everyone involved in this twisted financial carnival. She was feeding him secrets, I murmured. Or vice versa, Kramer said. The DA's pushing to charge Evan Vale for both murders now. I straightened. That's insane. Maybe, Kramer said, but both victims had ties to him, and he was at Kellish's penthouse before the body cooled. I watched him light his cigar with hands that weren't entirely steady. You don't buy it, he puffed once. I buy facts, and the facts smell wrong. He hesitated. If your boss has something, anything, now's the time. Because if he doesn't, the DA will bury Vale so deep the worms will need a map. It came out quiet, almost reluctant, the closest thing to a plea Kramer would ever allow himself. I didn't wisecrack this time. It didn't feel appropriate. I'll tell him, I said. Do that. He stepped back, letting the professionals work. And Goodwin, stay out of the way. He paused. For once. A uniform snorted. I filed that under unnecessary commentary and left before someone insulted my tie again. When I reached the brownstone, it was nearly noon and Wolfe was at his desk, massive as a disgruntled deity. His eyes rose when I walked in, and one glance at my face was enough to sour his whole expression. What now? He demanded. Verena Locke, I said. She's dead. He growled. Confound it. It wasn't loud, but the room vibrated anyway. Details. I gave them. The pills staged too neatly, the handwriting that didn't match her ledger script, the missing cologne bottle, the vanished financial records, the memo sheet. Wolfe listened with the stillness of a boa constrictor planning lunch. And Inspector Kramer? He asked. Professional, exhausted. I swallowed. He said the DA is ready to nail Vale for both murders. Wolfe's nostrils flared. Idiocy. Right. And he all but begged you to hurry. Begged, Wolfe repeated sharply. As close as he gets. Under oath, a man might mistake it for cooperation. Wolfe's mouth flattened. He pushed back from the desk, a dangerous maneuver given the ratio of mass to furniture. This is intolerable, he said. 2 murders within days, a witness dead under police supervision, and you. He swung toward me with eyes bright as polished obsidian. You will not leave this house without my explicit direction. I blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. His voice was cold steel. Your penchant for gallivanting places you in jeopardy. I will not allow it. I opened my mouth to argue, but one look at Wolfe's expression told me he was feeling something rare. Fear. Not for himself, for me. You think I'm next? I tried to make a joke of it. I don't even wear cologne. He didn't blink. Archie. That was all. Just my name, heavy as a manhole cover. All right, I said quietly. No unauthorized adventures, I'll behave. He grunted, unconvinced. I sat. Wolfe, this was no suicide. Someone staged it. I am aware. He tapped the desk. The killer fears exposure. Miss Locke knew too much. Her death was precipitated by something she learned yesterday. The meeting with Kellish? Perhaps. Or perhaps the meeting after. He leaned forward. Someone at the financial club, someone she feared. I nodded. Drosin? Harron? Clara Dunn? Someone with a reason to erase her. More than a reason, Wolfe said. A necessity. Silence stretched. Wolfe's mind was moving, not visibly, but in the subtle tightening of his jaw, the slow deepening of his frown, the way his fingers drummed on the armrest like he was tapping out a financial ledger. Only he understood. Archie, he said at last. Paper. I passed him a pad. He wrote 3 names. Harron, Drosin, Dunn. Then he circled all 3. One of these people killed Verena, he said. Possibly Kellish as well. I asked, where do we start? Before he could answer, Fritz knocked lightly and stepped in carrying a tray. Lunch, Fritz announced because the clock had struck 1, and lunch at the brownstone waits for no man, not even a murderer or an orchid. Wolfe scowled at the interruption, then dismissed Fritz with a nod. The tray held lamb ragout, rolls, and a chilled Riesling. My stomach approved. Wolfe pushed his chair back. We will eat, then we proceed. Proceed how? He headed toward the dining room. With caution. I followed him out, thinking that if Wolfe was worried enough to forbid me from leaving, the next phase of this game might be the deadliest yet. But, as always, murder had the courtesy to wait until Wolfe finished lunch. If there's one thing New York never runs out of, it's men who look like they could strangle you with a handshake, and the morning after Verena Locke's death, I was in the market for one. The mysterious bald bruiser Saul had described had been gnawing at my nerves like a rat on a sugar bag. So, at 9:15, I met Saul on Madison Avenue in front of a brokerage that looked legitimate only if you closed both eyes and spun in place. The brass plaque read, Drosin Consulting, but the smoked glass windows and heavy curtain inside suggested it consulted mostly with men who didn't want their names in ledgers. Saul greeted me with his usual understatement. "He's inside." "Alone?" I asked. "Probably," Saul said, "but he's the kind that doesn't need company to be dangerous." I straightened my tie, checked my notebook, and prepared my best smile, the one that makes people wonder whether I'm about to sell them insurance or pick their pocket. We stepped inside. The air smelled like cheap cigars and expensive desperation. A short hallway led to an office lit by a green banker's lamp and the faint glow of fear. Behind a dark wooden desk sat a man who matched Saul's description perfectly, bald head like polished stone, heavy shoulders filling the suit like it resented the job, and a face that could curdle milk at 50 paces. When he spoke, his accent rolled out like gravel down a chute, Russian, but seasoned by Manhattan grime. "You are the one following me," he said, pointing at Saul without rising. Saul nodded politely. "Professionally." Drozin's eyes moved to me. "And this?" I offered my hand. He took it. The sensation was like grabbing a warm lump of wet coal, clammy, dense, and faintly resentful of being touched. "Archie Goodwin," I said. "I work for Nero Wolfe." Drozin's eyebrows shot up just enough to show he wasn't thrilled. "You should not be here." "That's what everyone says," I told him. "But here I am." He gestured to 2 chairs with a flick that suggested they were optional luxuries and not guaranteed to remain under us. We sat. Drozin leaned forward, his expression divided between suspicion and exhaustion. "You want to know about Barton Kellish," he said. "Correct," Saul answered. Drozin snorted. "He played with money like a child plays with matches. Eventually the house burns." I said, "We're looking for something more specific than a moral lesson." Drozin's thick fingers tapped the desk. "He owed someone. Not money. Information." "Who?" I asked. Drozin hesitated, weighing risks. "Victor Harron." That name hit the room like a bad smell. Harron was the kind of financier who bought politicians the way other men bought neckties, in bulk, with little regard for pattern as long as it served the purpose. "Harron wanted the takeover documents," Drozin continued. "Kellish refused. Miss Locke, Verena, was caught between them." Saul asked quietly, "Was she passing secrets?" Drozin frowned. "She passed to both, like a bridge with 2 ends on fire." "So who killed them?" I asked. Drozin shrugged with a theatrical display of innocence that would have fooled a blind baby. "Not me." "Well, that's a relief," I said. "I was worried you'd confess and ruin my whole afternoon." His eyes narrowed. "Do not joke." "Sorry," I said automatically, then lied. "I'll stop." Drozin reached into his pocket and pulled out a scrap of paper. He studied it for a moment before sliding it across the desk toward me. "Kellish dropped this in our last meeting," he said. He wrote something on it, then tore it. I kept half. I picked it up. 1 jagged torn edge, 1 line of text. VX91, Mary. "Password fragment," Saul said immediately. Drozin nodded. "Off-book trading account. Only top men use such systems." "Whose account?" I asked. Drozin shook his head. "With only half, you cannot know. But Kellish feared it." I tucked the scrap into my notebook. "Why didn't you tell the police?" His laugh was low and unpleasant. "I try not to speak to police. They misunderstand." "I can imagine," I said. "But here's the rub, Mr. Drozin. Verena Locke is dead." For the first time, Drozin went still. Not shocked, just still, like he'd been struck in the mind and needed a second to feel it. "Suicide?" he asked. "No," he rubbed his jaw. Then Harron grows impatient. "Or someone else," I said. "Someone Kellish met." Drozin spread his hands. "I tell you what I know. But if you go to Harron's club, take caution. He is, how do you say, protected." "By money?" I asked. "By men who like using fists." "Good," I said. "I hate polite criminals." Drozin glared, then stood. The meeting was over. Saul and I left without argument because staying felt like inviting gravity to drop a chandelier. Outside, the wind smelled like coming rain and cab exhaust. Saul lit a cigarette and watched a delivery truck pass. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think Raphael Drozin knows more than he told," I said, "but also that he's scared enough to be useful." Saul nodded. "And Harron?" "Harron," I said, "is a problem I'll enjoy meeting." Saul smirked faintly. "That's what Wolfe is afraid of." We split up. Saul heading off to shadow Drozin's contacts, me heading back to the brownstone. When I arrived, Wolfe was in the office, leaning back, fingers steepled, expression sour enough to curdle Fritz's cream. I dropped the scrap of paper on his desk. "Your morning treasure." He lifted one eyebrow. "A password fragment?" "Precisely." He examined it under the lamp. "This corresponds to Meridian Holdings' off-book account registry, high level, designed for illicit trades or quiet bribes." Verena and Kellish were neck-deep in whatever this was, I said. "And Drozin says Harren wanted it." Wolfe gave the scrap a final look, then set it down with disgusted precision. "We must go to the Towers Exchange Society." "We?" I echoed, grinning. "You," he corrected. "I shall remain here, where I belong." "Of course," I said, "because the world is safer when you let me mingle with Manhattan's glamorous elite." He glared. "Archie, must you be insufferable?" "It's part of my charm." He waved a hand. "Far," I saluted. "I'll visit Harren's lair, with tact, diplomacy, or whatever passes for it in my toolbox." Wolfe exhaled through his nose. "Be brief, be wary, and do not preen." "I never preen," I said. "You preen constantly." Before I could argue, the office phone rang. I answered, listened for a moment, then covered the receiver. "Saul," I told Wolfe. "He says Harren just left the club, headed home." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Good. He will be off balance. You may glean something from his absence." I raised my brows. "Permission to infiltrate the Sacred Towers Exchange Society?" "Proceed," Wolfe said, "and mind yourself." "Always." "No," he corrected, "never. But do it anyway." I hung up the phone, straightened my tie, and headed for the door. As I left the office, Wolfe muttered behind me, just loud enough to hear, "Confound that boy," which, coming from him, was practically good luck. The Towers Exchange Society sat on East 44th with the kind of smug dignity only money and selective membership can buy. From the outside, it looked like a library that had swallowed a bank. Inside, it was worse. The moment I stepped through the revolving door, I was enveloped by velvet, cigar smoke, and the collective belief that the world turned only because the men inside willed it clockwise. If oxygen had been a private commodity, I'd have been charged admission for the privilege of breathing. A liveried attendant inspected me with the suspicion of a man trying to decide whether to throw me out personally or summon someone larger. My invitation, forged but respectable enough, got me past him. I headed up the marble staircase to the main lounge, a cavern of mahogany, leather, and whispered manipulation. Brokers, financiers, and corporate royalty lounged in deep chairs like crowned sloths. My target was Victor Harren. I spotted him immediately. He sat near the fireplace, wearing a charcoal suit so well-tailored it could have had its own trust fund. Harren had the kind of face that didn't smile so much as allow the corners of his mouth to consider the possibility. His silver hair gleamed under the chandelier like a crown polished by ambition. I walked up, expecting him to ignore me, but his eyes snapped onto mine like I owed him money. "You're Archie Goodwin," he said, voice smooth as a forged bond certificate. "Guilty," I replied. "I'm here on behalf of Nero Wolfe." His expression didn't change, but the temperature around him seemed to drop 5 degrees. "Tell Mr. Wolfe he is meddling where he is not invited." "I'll pass that along," I said. "But I don't recommend threatening him. He's allergic to intimidation." Harren chuckled once, mirthless, cold. "Mr. Goodwin, everything in this city has a threshold, even Nero Wolfe." I took a seat opposite him without being asked. The leather was so soft it probably wept when sat on by men without financial portfolios. "I need to talk about Barton Kellish," I said. Harren inhaled his cigar. "You're accusing me." "Not yet," I said, "but give me time." His eyes glinted. "I had no quarrel with Kellish." "That's not what Raphael Drozin says." "That man," Harren said with exquisite distaste, "is a parasite who vends rumours for profit." "Maybe," I said, "but he claims Kellish was pressured to hand over takeover documents." "Not by me." "Then why did you hire Verena Locke?" That got him. A faint twitch at the corner of the mouth. "You have been busy." "She consulted for you," I said, "even though you told the police you barely knew her." Harren smiled thinly. "Consultation is not romance, nor is it murder." "Funny you should say that," I said, "because Verena's dead. and Kellish is dead, and I find men who lie about their connection to a dead woman worth a follow-up interview." He leaned back, crossed his legs with leisurely menace. "Mr. Goodwin, this club is a haven of decorum. Do not stain it with theatrics." "Theatrics?" I asked lightly. "I left my cape at home." Harren flicked ash. "You're wasting your time. Kellish was reckless. He antagonized too many people, and your client's protégé, Evan Vale, was among the worst of them." I shook my head. "You're trying too hard. Vale's scared, but not guilty." "Fear," Harren said, "is rarely honest." He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't helpful either. He stood abruptly, signaling the interview was over. "One more thing," I said. "What happened 2 days ago when Lorna Vale visited the club?" Harren froze. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Sure you do," I said, "because Lorna was seen here, and she was upset." Harren recovered quickly. "Miss Vale is young, emotional. She misread a conversation." "What conversation?" He inclined his head. "Goodbye, Mr. Goodwin." He walked off, leaving behind an expensive waft of arrogance and cigar smoke. I needed a new angle. I scanned the room and spotted Clara Dunn near the bar counter, attractive in a sharp, intelligent way that suggested she could survive in a profession where losing a decimal point could spark a riot. I approached. "Miss Dunn?" She looked me over. "You don't belong here." "I've been told that many times," I said, "but the carpet hasn't spit me out yet." She smiled faintly. "Archie Goodwin, right? You work with Nero Wolfe." "Guilty again. I'm collecting charges today." She motioned toward a quieter alcove. "You're here because of Barton." "Yes," I said. "And because of Verena." Clara's expression tightened. I heard. "I need the truth," I said. "Starting with Kellish." Clara crossed her arms. "He stole the takeover documents from my firm." "So he intended to blackmail you?" "And Harren, and 3 other corporate whales." She exhaled. "He was building a portfolio of pressure." "And Verena?" "Caught in the middle," Clara said. "She thought she could broker peace, but Kellish wanted leverage, not peace." "Did you know Verena was seeing Harren professionally?" "I suspected," Clara said. "Harren likes to keep a finger on every pulse, but he underestimates consequences." I nodded. "And Kellish's password?" Clara reached into her clutch and produced a torn piece of paper, the mirror half to Drozin's. She handed it to me. "Barton gave it to me in a panic," she said. "Told me to keep it safe. I think he knew he was being hunted." I placed the 2 halves together. VX91 Meridian Lock. "Off-book trading account," I said. "The kind that ruins careers." Clara nodded grimly. "Or ends lives." "One more question," I said. "Lorna Vale. Why was she here 2 days ago?" Clara hesitated, then sighed. "She was looking for Barton." "Did she find him?" "No, but she left a note with the concierge." "What kind of note?" "A warning," Clara said softly. "She told Barton to stop, that playing both sides would get him killed." I whistled. "And yet Evan claims she knew nothing." "She knows more than she admits." That seemed to be a theme in this case. Before I could press further, a floor attendant approached us. "Mr. Goodwin," he said stiffly, "you're being requested at the front desk." I followed him out. At the door, he handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, a single typed line, "You are next." I tucked it away, not because I was scared, but because Wolfe would want to see the stationery. The Towers Exchange Society had outlived its usefulness for the day. I left before someone decided to demonstrate their club's security standards. Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe in his chair, digesting lamb ragout and human treachery with equal displeasure. I placed the password fragments and the threat note on his desk. He examined the scraps first. "The account," he muttered. "Meridian Lock, a shell ledger designed to funnel funds invisibly." "And now we have the full password." "Yes," Wolfe said. "A pity I have no intention of using it." "Why not?" "Because the account is bait," Wolfe said. "Kellish used it. Verena knew it. Someone else wanted it and was willing to kill for it." "And Harren?" "Harren," Wolfe said with distaste, "is a nucleus of iniquity. That club is his nest." "You're not wrong," I said. "If sin were sold by the ounce, the Towers Exchange would be a gold mine." Wolfe shot me a warning look. "Do not leap to conclusions. Miss Vale's involvement may be coincidental." I raised a brow. "You don't think so?" He glared. I think nothing until I have proof. But Miss Vale's presence at that club is inconvenient. The phone rang. I answered. Goodwin. Kramer's voice rasped across the line, ragged with exhaustion. Your buddy Lon Cohen just printed a front-page sermon. Says the police can't protect witnesses. Says we lost Verena Locke because we were outmaneuvered by privilege. The brass is furious. Sounds rough, I said. It's worse than rough, Kramer muttered. It's blood in the water. If Wolfe has anything, he'd better use it. I glanced at Wolfe, who watched me with narrowed eyes. I'll pass it on, I told Kramer. Hang in there. Tell Wolfe, Kramer said quietly. The killer's feeling pressure. That means they'll move again. He hung up. Wolfe sighed, leaned back and closed his eyes briefly. A third murder, he murmured, would be intolerable. Then we'd better find our killer. Wolfe opened his eyes. Sharp. Unyielding. We will, he said, and for the first time all day, I believed him. Some women enter the brownstone like they're stepping into a confessional. Lorna Vale entered like she was trying to outrun one. It was just past 3 in the afternoon, the narrow slice of time between Wolfe's orchid hours and Fritz's sacred dinner preparations, when the bell rang in a staccato rhythm that suggested panic, entitlement, and the faint hope that money could solve anything. I opened the door and found her on the stoop, wind-kissed, jittery, clutching her handbag like it contained the secrets of the universe, or enough dynamite to blow one up. Her eyes had that frantic sheen that told me half her story already. "Archie," she gasped, "I must speak to Mr. Wolfe at once." I stepped aside. "Come in before you set off the neighbourhood gossip meter." She entered the office with the gracelessness of a woman whose poise had finally rebelled and gone on strike. Wolfe was already seated behind his desk, large, imposing, and evidently displeased by the dramatic arrival. His eyebrows met in the middle like 2 generals preparing for war. "Miss Vale," he said. "Sit." She sat, hard, her gloved hands twisted in her lap. "Mr. Wolfe, I didn't know where else to go." Wolfe responded with the kind of silence that has weight. I took my chair, crossed my legs, and prepared for the show. "Miss Vale," Wolfe said finally, "Mr. Goodwin has brought to my attention several contradictions. Let us begin with the simplest. You told us you had never visited the Towers Exchange Society." Her breath hitched. I didn't. I leaned forward. "Funny, because Clara Dunn saw you there 2 days ago." She blinked rapidly. She must be mistaken. I wasn't. And the concierge confirms it, I added. Your signature in the visitor log doesn't lie quite as easily as you do. Her composure cracked like sugar glass. "All right," she whispered. "All right. I was there." Wolfe didn't move, but the air thickened. "Why?" "I was meeting Barton Kellish," she said, "privately." I waited. The room waited. Even the orchids upstairs seemed to pause photosynthesis. "For what purpose?" Wolfe asked. He was blackmailing me," she said, voice trembling. "Over Evan's trades. He claimed Evan had made illegal moves, that he could expose him. I begged him not to." Her voice pitched higher. Too high. I'd heard cleaner lies from pickpockets. "Interesting story," I said, "except it's nonsense." Her head snapped toward me. "It isn't." "Oh, it is," I said gently, "because Evan didn't know half the trades Kellish had on him. And you, after Kellish threatened you, would hardly send Evan to the penthouse, unless you wanted him implicated." She covered her face with her hands. I didn't know what else to do. "Try honesty," I suggested. She dropped her hands, eyes bright and fevered. "If Evan is charged, if he goes to prison, it will destroy my family. My father will lose his seat. My mother will be ruined." "And so," Wolfe said coolly, "you chose to deceive me." "I had no choice." "You always have a choice," Wolfe murmured. Her next move was the kind desperate people make when they think they can outmaneuver fate. She reached into her handbag and produced a small glass bottle. Slender, elegant, imported. Verena Locke's cologne. "I found this," she said, pushing it toward me. "In Evan's apartment. I think she planted it to frame him." I picked it up. It wasn't just familiar, it reeked. And so did her purse. "Miss Vale," I said softly, "this bottle didn't come from Evan's apartment." Her eyes widened. "It did! I swear!" I leaned in and sniffed the air around her bag. The scent was thick enough to cut into slices. You carried it in your purse. If Evan had touched it, your handbag wouldn't smell like the showroom floor of a Paris perfume house." She froze. Her throat worked, but words refused to form. Wolfe reached out, took the bottle, examined it as if judging the authenticity of a relic. Then he set it down with surgical precision. "You attempted," Wolfe said, "to plant evidence against your own brother." A sound escaped her, half sob, half gasp. "I only wanted to force your hand," she whispered, "to make you move faster. Evan is innocent, but everything points to him. I thought, if I made the case more urgent, if I pushed you—" "If you deceived me," Wolfe said, voice suddenly glacial, "I would withdraw." She crumbled, sliding forward in the chair. "Please, Mr. Wolfe, I'm sorry. I was terrified. I'll tell you the truth, all of it. Barton Kellish was threatening me. He said he had documents that could bury our entire family. He wanted money, leverage, everything." "And Evan?" Wolfe asked. "He didn't know," she said. "I hid it from him. I was afraid he'd do something foolish." Wolfe drummed his fingers once on the armrest. "Your lies," he said, "jeopardize everything. The investigation, your brother, yourself." "I know," she whispered. "Please, don't abandon us." Wolfe stared at her for 10 slow seconds that felt like a chess match between righteousness and mercy. Then he sighed, the kind of sigh that meant he hadn't yet decided to destroy someone. "I shall proceed," he said, "on the condition that there are no further falsehoods." She nodded violently. "None. None at all." "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said, "escort Miss Vale out." I rose, opened the door. Lorna walked toward it like a woman newly released from a guillotine line, but halfway out she grabbed my sleeve. "Archie," she whispered, "do you believe me now?" "No," I said. "But Wolfe hasn't fired you yet. That's the closest thing to mercy you'll get today." She left, trembling. I returned to the office. Wolfe had his eyes closed, not dozing, but thinking, shaping, refining. "You handled that well," I said. He didn't open his eyes. "Do not flatter me. It is distasteful." "So is lying to you, apparently," I said. He opened one eye. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "If she lies again, I will dismiss her." His eye closed again. "And you will bar her from the premises." "Gladly." The phone rang, I answered. "Goodwin." Kramer's voice came through cracked and strained, like a man who'd been chewing glass all morning. "We're running out of time. The DA wants charges filed inside 24 hours. They're screaming in my ear." "How unpleasant for them," I said. "Cut it out. Listen." His voice lowered. "If your fat genius has anything left, anything, this is the hour." I tilted the receiver away, turning to Wolfe. "Kramer says this is the hour." Wolfe grunted. "Indeed it is." He rose, a rare, momentous gesture, and adjusted his vest. "Archie," he said. "Yes?" "Gather them." I felt it in my chest. The shift, the moment the wolves start circling and the trap snaps shut. "The showdown?" I asked. "The denouement," Wolfe corrected. "We are prepared." He sat, rang the bell for Fritz, and said the words that signaled the beginning of the end. "Notify all concerned. Tonight, the truth will be extracted." I grabbed my notebook, my coat, and the grin that always appears when I know the real carnage is about to begin. Because when Nero Wolfe says gather them, somebody's about to break, and it won't be us. The line-up in Wolfe's office looked like the world's most hostile cocktail party, minus the cocktails and plus a murder or two. I've seen grim gatherings in that room before, but this one had a special tension, like a violin string pulled so tight the first wrong note would snap it clean in half. It was just past 8, dinner finished, orchids well behind us, and Wolfe had planted himself behind his desk with the solemnity of a federal judge who enjoyed the sentencing phase more than the trial. Fritz had made a ceremonial entrance moments earlier with a polished tray of coffee, the sort that smelled rich enough to wake the dead, though in this crowd, waking the dead might complicate the evening agenda. Kramer arrived, accompanying Evan Vale, looking like a man who'd been told his last cigarette had gone stale, while Pearlie Stebbins flanked Harron as if expecting him to bolt for the window. Lorna Vale perched on the edge of her chair like a sparrow with a broken nerve. Clara Dunn sat primly with a posture suggesting she'd been carved from mahogany. Raphael Drozen lounged with the oily ease of someone who'd brought his own guilt as a party favour. I took my usual position near Wolfe's globe, hands in pockets, expression attentive enough to look official and casual enough to irritate Kramer. Wolfe let the silence settle the way only he knew how, wide, heavy, obliging everyone to hear themselves breathe. Finally, he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he intoned, "I trust you appreciate that your presence here is not voluntary in the colloquial sense. Inspector Kramer has cooperated with me in corralling you, and I expect your patience until I conclude." Harren scoffed, shifting in his tailored suit. "This is absurd. I agreed to come because I was told it would clarify the situation. If this is a performance, Wolfe, I am not your audience." Wolfe didn't even blink. "Mr. Harren, if you were my audience, I would have charged admission." I hid a grin. Kramer coughed into his fist. Could have been a laugh, could have been a warning. Hard to tell with him. Wolfe folded his hands, fingertips touching like he was contemplating a chessboard only he could see. "We shall begin." Barton Kellish was engaged in financial extortion. Quite lucrative, quite reckless. He intended to blackmail you, Mr. Harren, with documents implicating your shell companies in covert market manipulation. Harren's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. A good poker face, ruined only by the way his cufflinks clicked when his hand twitched. Wolfe continued. "Miss Verena Locke, whose death the police have incorrectly labelled suicide, was caught between you. She sought to save herself by balancing favours, misdirection, and, if her ledger drafts are to be believed, a misguided hope that she might leverage her position into security." Drozin shifted in his chair, and I caught the faintest curl of Wolfe's lip. He'd been waiting for that. "You, Mr. Drozin," Wolfe said, turning slightly, "served as Mr. Harren's courier. You collected documents, transmitted messages, arranged clandestine meetings." Drozin spread his hands. "I never—" "Pfui! You are a courier who carried more than envelopes. Your accent betrays nothing. Your fingerprints betray you entirely." Wolfe's voice sharpened. "You were present for at least 2 exchanges. You are peripheral to the murders, not central. I will not belabor your role unless necessary." Drozin subsided, wiping his palms on his trousers. I'd seen drier men in steam rooms. Wolfe looked to Lorna next. "Miss Vale, you visited Kellish the evening of his death, not to aid him, but to beg for your brother's safety. You were distraught. You lied to me once, and once was enough." Lorna swallowed, colour rising in her face. Evan turned to stare at her, pain and confusion mixing like ink in water. She lowered her eyes. "You did not kill Kellish," Wolfe said, "nor did you kill Miss Locke. Your panic drove you to plant the cologne bottle, an infantile manoeuvre that could have destroyed your husband's defence. I admonished you earlier. I do so again." Lorna started to cry softly. Evan reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled away, ashamed. Clara Dunn's expression did not flicker. The woman had a face designed for boardrooms and funerals. Wolfe shifted his gaze to Evan. "Your false alibi, Mr. Vale, was not to conceal murder, but to conceal a meeting with Miss Locke. She aided you in identifying Mr. Harren's illegal trades. She was frightened and sought your help. You, being a fool, did not share this with the police." Evan muttered, "I couldn't. She made me swear." Wolfe cut him off. "You have a deplorable habit of honouring foolish promises. It nearly cost you your freedom." Kramer grunted. "Nearly still might be will. Stick to the point, Wolfe." "I shall, Inspector," Wolfe replied, "if you refrain from interrupting." Kramer's eyebrows shot up, but he kept still. Wolfe turned his full stare onto Victor Harren. "You, sir, are the murderer." A collective inhale tightened the room like it had shrunk 2 feet. Harren didn't flinch, but his cufflinks clicked again, louder this time. "You arranged a meeting with Kellish under the guise of negotiation regarding the documents," Wolfe said. "When he attempted to increase his demands, you killed him. You then staged the scene to implicate Mr. Vale. Later, realizing Miss Locke wavered in her loyalty, you silenced her. Her supposed suicide note was a forgery, laughable in execution, tragic in consequence." Clara Dunn leaned forward. "But where's your proof?" Wolfe lifted a small envelope from the desk. "Here." He withdrew 2 paper scraps, placed them together like puzzle pieces, and slid them forward. Pearlie stepped closer instinctively. "This," Wolfe said, "is the full password for an off-book trading account. One half recovered by Mr. Drozin, the other from Miss Dunn. Combined, they access an account registered to a shell entity whose beneficiaries include only one individual." Wolfe paused, savouring it. "Victor Harren. Harren rose so abruptly his chair slammed backward. Pearlie seized his arm and Kramer stepped in with more speed than I'd seen in him in months. Harren twisted, snarling something about lies, corruption, and Wolfe being a parasite, but the words choked off as Pearlie pinned him. Kramer's voice rasped. "That's enough." He wrestled Harren's other arm into control. "Damn it, Wolfe, next time a warning." "You had ample warning, Inspector," Wolfe said serenely. "You simply chose to disregard it." Kramer breathed hard through his nose, glaring at Harren like he wanted the authority to crack him across the skull. "Wolfe," he finally said. "Well done. A beat." "Damn you!" Wolfe inclined his head a fraction. "Inspector." I pretended to study my shoelaces so no one would see me grinning. Wolfe looked around the room. "Mr. Goodwin, kindly remove them from my premises." And that was my curtain cue. Getting that whole circus out of Wolfe's office took coordination, muscle, diplomacy, and the ability to dodge flailing limbs. Luckily, I'm trained in all four. Pearlie marched Harren out first, gripped like a man transporting freshly lit dynamite. Harren didn't go quietly. He muttered threats about lawyers, judges, senators, markets collapsing, and the tragic fate awaiting anyone who crossed him. None of it earned him so much as a backward glance from Wolfe, who had already turned his chair a half-inch toward the beer Fritz had placed within reach. Evan followed next, escorted by Kramer, not because Evan posed a threat, but because the DA still needed formal statements, and Kramer wasn't letting a suspect wander free on Wolfe's say-so alone. As they passed me, Kramer murmured, "Have him at the precinct at 9 in the morning, and tell your boss we'll be triple-checking those documents." "Always a pleasure, Inspector," I said. He grunted, which for Kramer is practically warm affection. Clara Dunn left quickly, her heels clicking across the marble like punctuation marks. She paused only once, casting an icy look back at Wolfe, perhaps to commit his face to memory for future litigation or vengeance. Drozen shuffled out behind her, wiping sweat from his brow, mumbling about misunderstandings and the tragic decline of American civility. I didn't offer to shake his hand. I'd already endured that once, and replaying the sensation of gripping a warm coal wasn't on my evening program. Last came Lorna Vale. She lingered at the threshold, clutching her purse. "Mr. Wolfe," she whispered, voice raw, "thank you for saving Evan." Wolfe didn't look at her. "Madam, I saved the truth. Your brother merely benefited." Lorna let out a small, shaky breath, nodded, and left, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume, layered over the sharp trace of Verina's cologne still clinging to her purse seams. Panic makes people sloppy, but honesty, under Wolfe's cross-examination, makes them terrified. When the door finally clicked shut behind her, the brownstone fell into one of those pristine silences Wolfe hoards like a miser with gold coins. It lasted a good 20 seconds before he let out a deep, slow exhale and reached for his beer. "You must stop inviting such cacophonous gatherings into my house," he said. I folded my arms. "Me? You're the impresario. I'm just the usher." "You are impertinent. Only on days ending in Y." He shot me a glare that, under the wrong circumstances, could have ended careers. Under ours, it only meant he was too drained to bother with a full lecture. I crossed to my desk and started typing notes while the dust settled, literally and metaphorically. A brownstone finale always leaves the air molecules feeling rearranged. Wolfe drank several inches of beer before speaking again. "Archie." I paused mid-keystroke. "Yes, sir?" "You performed adequately." Coming from Wolfe, that was the kind of praise men etch into plaques. He set his glass down. "More than adequately," he added, almost begrudgingly. "I'm gratified you were not arrested." I swiveled toward him, eyebrows up. "Why? You'd miss my charming company." "No," he said. "The disruption would have been inconvenient." "Well," I said, leaning back, "for you, that's practically poetry." He harumphed, tugging his vest into place as if insulted by the compliment. But his eyes, a rare glimpse, held the faintest glimmer of something that might be mistaken for affection if you squinted from across the room with poor lighting. I resumed typing. "Client still owes us the remainder of the fee," I reminded him. "She will pay," Wolfe said, with alacrity. "No woman conscious of her reputation ignores the debt she owes to exoneration." I typed that phrase verbatim into the case file. It deserved to be preserved for future generations of legal scholars or stand-up comedians. A few minutes passed in companionable quiet. The case, like any good storm, had blown itself out. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual insomnia. Taxis, horns, neon, the late-shift heartbeat of a city that refuses rest. Inside, Wolfe's office, solid mahogany, leather chairs, shelves of books, the globe marking corners of the earth he'd never visit, felt steady again. Then, because Wolfe never leaves well enough alone, he added, "Of course, this outcome depended on your not succumbing to reckless bravado." I looked up. "Bravado? Me? Sir, I conducted myself with all the decorum of a saint," he snorted. "Archie Goodwin, you could not impersonate a saint even with a choir to assist you." "That's libel," I said. "I'll expect an apology written on high-quality paper." "You will wait in vain." I grinned and stretched. The night had been long, the kind that etches itself onto your bones. But with Harron in custody, 2 murders unravelled, a client unframed and Wolfe in rare form, I could feel the last pressures of the case finally easing off my shoulders. Wolfe pushed back from his desk a fraction of an inch, his version of collapsing into an armchair. "Mr. Goodwin, lock the door. The hour is late and the day has been egregiously taxing." "Yes, sir." I stood, turned the bolt and returned. "Anything else?" "Yes." He lifted the bell cord slightly, let it fall. "Fritz will bring us something light, enough to sustain me until tomorrow's breakfast." Something light from Fritz meant at least 3 courses, each better than anything served within 20 blocks. My stomach perked up in anticipation. "You know," I said, leaning on the back of my chair, "for a man who claims he despises fuss, you certainly encourage evenings like this." Wolfe closed his eyes. "I do not encourage murder, Archie. No, just its resolution in your living room." "That," he said, "is a necessity born of police inadequacy." I laughed. Better never say that within Kramer's hearing. He hears it even when I do not say it. Wolfe paused, then added, "and frequently proves me correct." I conceded the point with a nod. A soft knock sounded. Fritz entered with a tray, sandwiches cut with surgical precision, a pot of fresh coffee, sliced fruit presented like artwork. He placed the tray at the edge of Wolfe's desk with a courteous bow. "If you require more, Mr. Wolfe, please ring." Wolfe inclined his head. "Thank you, Fritz." Fritz departed with the silent dignity of a man who could run a small kingdom if asked. Wolfe sampled a sandwich, sighed contentedly, and gestured for me to take one. I did. We ate in companionable quiet for a few minutes before Wolfe finally spoke again, voice softer than usual. "Archie," he said, "I am satisfied with the outcome. You handled yourself with competence and—" he grimaced like the word pained him. "Restraint." "High praise," I said. "Careful, or I'll start expecting birthday presents." He ignored that. "Tomorrow we will draft the full record. The district attorney will want it, Inspector Kramer will need it, and Mrs. Vale will pay for it. I'll sharpen my pencils." He gestured lazily. "Go to bed, Archie." I blinked. Wolfe telling me to quit for the night was about as common as snowfall in July. "You sure?" "Yes." He took another sandwich. "You will be useless tomorrow if you remain loitering." "Well, when you put it so sweetly," I gathered my notes, straightened the desk, and headed for the door. I paused, hand on the knob, looking back at him, the bulk of him in his chair, the lamplight catching the edge of his features, the office settling around him like a throne room at peace after battle. "Good night, Wolfe." "Good night, Archie." And as I headed upstairs, I couldn't help grinning. Wolfe had given me the closest thing he ever would to a heartfelt thank you. For the great Nero Wolfe, that's practically a love letter.